spirituality can take you to some interesting places. But how many people would expect to find themselves in a life-threatening dilemma? Well, that's what happened to me. So can I tell you my story?
Simone's story of seeking spirituality took her down some unexpected pathways. She shares how she went through a catastrophic scenario, not only surviving with her life, but fully recovering without permanent injuries. She knew she had a purpose, and that she had been divinely protected for a reason. So whatever you are going through right now, this story would inspire you to gaze beyond the realms of human limitation to where the miraculous becomes possible.
I became involved in an Eastern religious group after leaving school, which ended up having an almost fatal effect on my life. This was led by a guru promoting a lifestyle of satsang, service and meditation. And my daily discipline included morning and evening meditation, going to meetings, and whenever the opportunity arose, we would travel to big festivals abroad to see the guru with hundreds and thousands of his followers. Now, this lifestyle filled many of the emotional gaping holes in my life, and I became more and more deeply involved to the point where I even gave up my college course. Now, there's always a backstory, and there were events in my upbringing which were very traumatic, like my mother and father divorcing, my father dying when I was only 17. And as a teenager, I began to challenge some of the traditional Jewish values. And over time, this affected the relationship I had with my family. My mother began to realize that this group I'd become involved in seemed to have a controlling impact over my life, and she became understandably alarmed. She could see that my life was being derailed. She'd become concerned, and she began to feel that my mind was being taken over by strange beliefs, and she knew she needed to do something. So it took me completely by surprise when, arriving home for a visit one day, I found myself confronted by bearded rabbis who my mother had approached to help her rescue her daughter from a religious cult. Now, they claimed they could help deprogram young people who'd come under any form of brainwashing or mind control. Now, this was a scenario that had been mentioned in the meetings I attended. We'd been warned that anyone who might try to prevent a devotee from following their beloved guru was deemed basically evil. And the crucial issue was, of course, to remain a true follower and to escape if ever you found yourself forcibly detained. Because the teaching was that the guru held the key to a once in thousands of lifetimes opportunity to reach nirvana, to be free of the cycle of life and death. So a few days after this deprogramming process, which meant repetitive questions and challenges from these rabbis, I became desperate to get away. Now, the door to the flat had been locked, so leaving in the normal manner was not going to be an option. And a thought arrived in my head, a strong inner voice suggesting that I leave by a window. Now, I'm not sure how long I deliberated or why some intense fear didn't rise up on the inside, preventing me from even contemplating such a thing. But within me, continuing to follow the guru was my driving priority. And the inner voice told me just to surrender, abandon your life. Now, I had no suicidal intentions. I'd never planned to end my life, but I had to get out of that situation. And so I exited from the window to freedom. However, the flat was on the second floor. And the next thing I remember was waking up in hospital. I'd been told that I'd hit my head on concrete and that I'd been unconscious for 5 days. But amazingly, there was no damage to my skull, no broken bones in my body, no significant injuries except fractures in my feet that healed automatically. And within 2 weeks, I was discharged. I'm just so overwhelmed and grateful at the miraculous way my life had been spared, protected. I could have so easily died or been left with permanent injuries, but God had clearly spared my life. So on discharge, I immediately returned to the group, spent another year completely focused as a devotee, and I can only imagine how heartbroken my mother must have been at that time, how devastated. Yet I rejected the family. I considered they'd betrayed me. The group was my life, until one day, everything radically changed. It was during an evening meeting when footage of the Guru's teachings were being shown, and I can only describe what seemed to be a moment of illumination. I became aware that jumping out of this guru was an evil presence, and I felt so uncomfortable that I just had to leave the room and the building immediately. And there followed an almost instant decision that despite a 5-year involvement with this group, I needed to leave the organisation. And I knew beyond all shadow of doubt that the Guru's claims and teachings were not the truth. And so I returned to live at home, where I gradually began to piece together what had happened over those last years. Now, I had sincerely believed that the Guru was the incarnation of God and full of goodness. But aghast, I began to realise that actually a process of brainwashing had been taking place. And I understood that repetitive teachings and the passive meditation practices had had an effect of mind control. I further researched the phenomena and discovered that the human mind can be altered and controlled by certain psychological techniques, and that my ability to think critically and independently had been undermined. Yes, I'd been really sincere, but so naive. And following this was a state of pretty much disorientation. I was trying to piece my life back together again and find out who I was and find new purpose. And so I connected with Judaism and attempted to live a more extreme Orthodox life than the family were used to. And that created tension, so I didn't pursue it for too long. But I'd made an inner vow to never allow any organisation to control me again. So when I discovered the diverse world of alternative spirituality, I found it very attractive. And I began to investigate psychic development, spiritual healing, different meditation practices, and began to look to enhance spiritual development. And so I went from one group to another very happily for a number of years. Now, a defining moment was triggered by meeting a male who looked like the classical blue-eyed Jesus Christ, in that film, Jesus of Nazareth, which led to some really interesting discussions. And prior to that time, I'd only met the idea of Jesus in books like The Aquarian Gospel or A Course in Miracles, because to me, Christianity looked like just another traditional religion, and I certainly wasn't drawn to those ancient church buildings with stained glass windows. And as a Jewish person, the name Jesus had always been a forbidden word, out of bounds. But I suddenly became curious about this Jesus and decided that I should read the source material, the actual New Testament itself. And once I started reading it, I couldn't actually put it down, and I read it from cover to cover. And that night, and for the next few days, I had some really unusual dreams. You know, the kind that stay with you for a lifetime. Dreams that have an unusual and intense, vivid quality. Now, in the first dream, it looked like something of a global catastrophe, an end-of-the-world scenario. And I saw these people who'd been miraculously saved from destruction. And I realized later, this seemed to link with the idea of Armageddon in the book of Revelation, which I'd only read once. And in another dream, I saw long queues of people. They were lining up, hundreds of them. And somehow I knew that they were heading for the throne where there's going to be a judgment of God of some sort. And it seemed to be a somber, holy moment. And the third dream, this was about 3 nights on, was really exciting, joyful. I dreamt of Jesus himself, and I saw myself flying around with Jesus, and there was a voice saying, "This is Simone, she's here to teach about God." Now, looking back at that time when I read the New Testament, it was as though a padlocked steel door had opened and the lights turned on, invading a dark room. And I also felt that I detected a secret conspiracy that had aimed to ensure that Jesus was rejected and dismissed. And I realized how negatively I'd reacted towards Jesus, but yet never really knowing anything about his message or teachings, only having absorbed the views of other people. And the sense of not wanting to be deceived again rose up, the same way I felt after walking away from the guru. I had to know more, and from there on, a connection with Christ began to form. I found him to be magnetic, charismatic. The words he spoke had a power. I was deeply moved by stories of compassion towards people who were the rejects of their society, and how he came to people in distress, how he healed those that doctors couldn't help, and the incredible miraculous things he did. So it was some years after those dreams that, unexpectedly, I was invited to church by neighbours. We happened to all move into the same block of flats. And on the second visit, an extraordinary experience took place that entirely changed the landscape of my life. Now, the spiritual atmosphere in this church meeting was powerful. It was in a hotel room. The music was stirring, uplifting. The words of the pastor seemed to speak to me personally. And at the end of the meeting, there was an invitation for any who felt drawn to pray and just open their heart and respond to Jesus. And the prayer I prayed became a portal into an entirely new dimension. Now, I don't remember the precise words or what I said, but I knew that in this moment, everything was changing, and that I was in the very presence of God. It was as though my life had been orchestrated to come to this point, to be in this meeting and to meet with my Creator. I experienced waves of love emanating from this incredible being into my heart. And there was like a sense of coming home, a sense of completeness. And I knew in that moment that I was uncovered, that everything I'd done in my life was known, the best, the worst, every detail. And yet it was safe. And there was a mixture of joy and pain, the sadness of my regrets, the joy at this love that was a love I was always looking for. I knew that something completely heavenly and divine had accessed my being, and I was undone. Now, after that experience, revelation after revelation began to pour into my soul, and life looked completely differently. I understood that there'd been a realm of darkness that had led me in a number of destructive and deceptive pathways, hiding itself behind attractive disguises, aiming to counterfeit the light of God and distort the truth. And where there'd been experiences of betrayal, a lack of parental nurturing, I'd been vulnerable to all manner of exploitation. I realized how infrequently my relationships had felt safe, and how my internal structures had been erected to defend myself from the wounds and the hurts of life. And yet, despite all of my barriers, the love and the power of God had completely knocked down those defense mechanisms and revealed a love that I'd always been looking for. And I realized that the access to this experience was Christ. There was a mystic secret of God manifesting through Christ. And this was far beyond any spiritual philosophy, meditation, claims of psychic ability. There was something deep within that connected heart to heart with a spiritual reality that came direct from God. Now, as a Jewish person, I didn't expect to have anything to do with Jesus. But I discovered that the mystic realms of God on a heart-to-heart level completely opened up through Christ as the access point, as the portal. And I began to see that man-made religion, man-made spirituality distorts and conceals the very simple truth of God's love, of a relationship with God, through techniques, rituals, rules. Because we were meant to live in connection with our Creator, not as cosmic orphans lost in a universe. So I don't know where you are today listening to me. It may be that you're beginning to feel a sense of there must be something more, a sense of something stirring within, a beckoning in your heart, in your inner self. And perhaps you would like to experience that same power that I experienced. That connection with Christ is available for you. So I would encourage you to open your heart and allow yourself to trust, to find out more about the mystic secret of God in Christ. So I'm going to say a prayer. Pray along with me, repeat it and make it your own. Or if you don't feel ready right now, go back to this and wait until you know the time is right for you. I'm willing to open my heart to experience connection with God through Christ. Jesus, I ask for a revelation of who you truly are. I wish to align my heart with your unconditional love. Change me from deep within. Transform the darkness in my soul. I open my heart to a supernatural, heart-to-heart connection with you. Thank you for guiding me towards my true destiny.